So several professionals who testified at the state capture inquiry will convene a media briefing today to call for accountability on large-scale corruption in South Africa. The Whistleblowers for Change aims to develop a culture of blowing the lid, or lifting the lid rather, on graft and eradicate the professional, financial and personal victimization. Social worker John Clarke, who's actually provided psychosocial services to a number of whistleblowers, joins us now via our video link for more on today's events. John, it's great to see you. Thanks for making time indeed. Help us understand what at least those whistleblowers who are taking part in today's media briefing are hoping to get out of it.
Well, let's put it this way. Thank you, Ayanda, for the opportunity. Power has actually no defense against the truth. All it can then do is attack. And the whistleblowers that I've been working with have all, in one way or another, experienced various degrees of severity, victimization and retaliation for speaking the truth to power. And they are really now hoping, as a solidarity, as a joined-up group, to be a force to be reckoned with, because it's not power. They're fighting a power over strategy, but what they have now is an absolutely unstoppable force. It's power with. It's solidarity, and we are hoping that this will be the threshold there whereby whistleblowers are going to be regarded completely differently from this time on from the media, as being the last line of defense against South Africa trembling on the edge of falling into a failed state.
Yeah. I don't recall seeing a group of whistleblowers organized in this way. And, I think many of us would be disillusioned to believe that there weren't whistleblowers in the past. In fact, one of your clients, Sikosi Pikhatebe, started out as a whistleblower. He was with the Amadiba crisis. He spoke out and sadly was killed. Do you reckon that them coming together this way would at least, in some instance, help provide the kind of support that they've needed since speaking out?
Well, in some ways all it does, and that's what it always does. I mean, as a social worker of now 40 years, I've always preferred working in group work as a methodology for helping people transform and transcend their situations. I mean, you think of all the most powerful ways of dealing with addiction and things like that are group-based things, like Alcoholics Anonymous, etc., etc. So mutual support is a far more powerful thing than individual casework type therapy. So you mentioned Bazuka Harebe, who was the chair of the Amadiba Crisis Committee. The Amadiba Crisis Committee is one of those solidarity groups. And look what they've achieved over the last 15 years now in stopping the mining of the ancestral lands. And now they've been the people that have been one of the leading challenges against Shell. So, I don't want to try and give you the impression that I've got a special magic wand that I wave and suddenly things happen. It's what happens when people bind together in a true solidarity that actually of common purpose, and it's more of then an organism than an organization. It's something that has life within it rather than a structure for command and control, and you know how organizations tend to work. So yeah, I think that gives an idea of what the rationale and the logic is. And it's really, I'm just been doing my job as a social worker.
And given the expertise you've been able to garner from the work you do, what would you reckon would be the best intervention from government to assist whistleblowers, again, given their needs, given what you found they lack after speaking out? Well,
we'll hear from the media conference today what our response is to the Zondo Commission. We're very encouraged that the Deputy Chief Justice has been a strong advocate now and is calling for all sorts of measures, structures, institutions, and as well as the overhaul of the Protected Disclosures Act, the legislation. And our hope is that there will be as part and parcel of forming this new anti-corruption task force or strategy, or I forget what they call it, that there would be not just a institution to legislatively protect whistleblowers, but then also to support them, so that people like me can support people more, with the counselling and support that they go through. Because I mean, what I can say about today, I mean, there are some high-profile whistleblowers who will not be there, not because they're not supporting of it, but because their physical, psychosocial, and mental health is just so fragile. They've said, John, please will you just talk on our behalf and be our spokesperson. And the two people that I can mention, and there are many besides them, are Musila Motepu. Now, everybody knows who she is.
Yeah.
She's written a book. She's spoken to things. She says, John, please, next time I'm going to appear in public will be to testify when the NPA, puts her on the stand to testify against the people that she has exposed. And the other person is Angelo Agrizzi. Now, Angelo, people know him very well. He's written 2 books. He is, interestingly, the only person in the entire history of the Public Finance Management Act who has been charged under that act. And he's not even a civil servant. So there's been a clear strategy. I'm not presuming on guilt and innocence or complicity. All I'm saying is that we have got people to speak truth, and they need to be free to speak that truth without fear of intimidation, victimization, and all the rest. So, yeah, I think that with that sort of sense of binding together and that sense of solidarity and a sense of vision, I mean, I feel extraordinarily privileged to be working with people who have agency, who have got protagonism. And I would hope that what the government would do is, not be defensive about what they have to say, recognize that truth and power have this sort of difficult relationship throughout history, but that if they're going to have a sense of authority and legitimacy, well, it's people like whistleblowers that need to be not just tolerated, embraced in a way that we encourage all other people waiting out there with information to share to come forward. I mean, the analogy I use is that it's like there's a vast subterranean aquifer of information below the surface waiting to come about that will basically incriminate all sorts of people. And there are a lot more people besides those who are named in the Zonda report.
Right.
And the protection of them and support of them will be what will ensure that our country is cleansed of this contagion of corruption with this wonderful flowing of fresh, clean water.
Yeah.
How's that?
It sounds great. The imagery, too, looks great in my mind. The concern, of course, is that we could spend a considerable amount of time saying the right things. In fact, government officials can respond with their own platitudes. And the real concern is that that could end up just being lip service, right? How do we turn whatever is said today in today's media briefing into something more tangible? For instance, even on a practical level, like issues of employment, outside of Themba Maseko, who we've heard about in the last 24 hours, having finally received some kind of employment at the Wits School of Governance. Many of the whistleblowers who've spoken out, who have really impressive CVs, sadly are sitting at home, and you can't help but wonder why. To whose benefit is that?
Yeah, it's something we've grappled with often in our group, and one of them is that these people have got such a highly developed sense of conscience and consciousness that in some ways they're almost unemployable because conventional organizations kind of not quite sure how to handle people with such strong sense of protagonism and agency. But at the same time, I mean, there's no reason why we can't fund a civil society NGO type based organization. And there used to be one, by the way, actually unfortunately closed down for lack of funding. There was ODAC. The Open Democracy Advice Center, where they had a whistleblower hotline, and sadly, they ran out of funds and they weren't able to keep going. And I'm just so sad about that. That was 2010 that I think they failed. Had that still been in existence, I wouldn't have had to be doing what I'm doing. We work closely with all the other sort of NGOs, Corruption Watch, OUTA, the Active Citizens Movement. Cynthia Stimple, I have to say, stands proud as one of my all-time heroes. I'm wanting to nominate her for canonization for what she's done, because she has formed Citizens of Conscience, which is another organism, shall we say, of people who have a very clear sense of what happens, of where truth lies, and how truth is a very emancipating effect once it's embraced. Recognizing that, first of all, it's going to make you miserable, because the truth is never uncomfortable. And so in that sense, it's about it. And I don't think we lack any public sympathy and support. And depending how things now go, I mean, it's been encouraging in some ways to see Busa saying they're going to commit to an integrity fund and things like that. So we will talk with them. At the same time, we're not going to be co-opted. We're not going to be captured. We're going to be free spirits whose only ultimate, kind of North Star is what is the right thing to do in the situation.
Yeah, got you. Sure. A lot to unpack. We look forward to that briefing. John Clarke, thanks very much for speaking to us. John is a social worker and a whistleblower advocate, so to speak, has worked closely with some of those who are brave enough to actually lift the lid on corruption, sometimes even knowing what cost that might come with. Once again, thanks very much indeed. That briefing, I understand, will take place from about 2 o'clock or so. We'll get you the exact time in a moment.